Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an author and game designer, writing for D&D novels such as Ravenloft and Spelljammer, all the way to RPGs like Marvel Superheroes, Gamma World. He's also worked on video games that you've heard, like The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, all of that kind of stuff. So please welcome the one, the only Bruce Nesmith to Epic Realms. Welcome on in. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hopefully, I'm not cloned, so I can be the one and only.
You are the one and only, not cloned, not cloned at all. Well, I say one and only because you've worked on so many different things and like iconic things. It's not like you've just done like a little bit here and a little bit there of all these different things. It's everywhere you go, you do something massive. And nobody else, really does on that scale everywhere you go. So it's just really cool and it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
No, thank you. I like to say I'm one of the luckiest sons of bitches on earth. So,
Let's go in the way back machine. As a kid growing up, what were some of your like influences? Were you into video games and board games? Were there that much in the era of you growing up?
it's funny when you're a young child, you don't realize the things that are going to influence you when you get older. And
Mm-hmm.
it's only when you look back and you go, wow, that really made a difference for me. So for example, I remember when I was, well, this was probably middle school sometime, so 11, 12. It's been a long time, so I couldn't tell you exactly when. But my father had this old steel desk, and behind it were these shelves filled with books. Now, he was a lawyer, so some of them were law books, some of them were old musty history books. And on the very top, crowding the ceiling, was a bunch of paperbacks. And it turns out there were about 30 science fiction books up there. So here I am at 11 years old. My father's not home. My mother's off doing something else. And I'm climbing on this desk, standing up on it and pulling these books down to read, which I eventually asked my father, hey, can I read these? And he actually let me own them. So some of my earliest influences were old school authors like A.E. Van Vogt, who I read a lot of at that point in time. The classic Robert Heinlein, things like that. Uh, the other influence that would go more towards the gaming side, for whatever reason, my father decided to buy us a color TV way before color TV was in every home. Yeah, yeah, I know that's dating me, but what can I say? I've also programmed on punch cards. I'm sure we'll get to that later. Uh, and he bought an Odyssey system for us to work with that, which had such wonderful games as Pong and the original Break. The Break. I
Yeah,
forget the
the
name
little
of the
ball
board.
breaker thing where it's
Yeah,
very
I want to say
similar to Pong.
Minesweeper, but I don't think it was Minesweeper. But you break the little bricks and you
Yeah.
bounce it around. And so we played that. Nobody else in the neighborhood or amongst my friends had one of those, but I didn't think anything of it.
Right.
But I cannot say that that did not have an influence. That had to have an impact on me when I was that age. And then when I was 16 is when I was first exposed to Dungeons and Dragons. So, you look back and you realize there's this steady theme of fantasy and science fiction and gaming running through my early years that I didn't even understand at the time.
You still have those science fiction think books that your dad gave you, the paperbacks. As we see him scroll and pan on over to a shelf full of them.
Actually, I can do you one better than that. I have about 2,500, 3,000 paperbacks, which I know there's people out there who have way, way more.
Right.
But I had enough of them that my wife got tired of them being on shelves littered all over the guest bedroom. So she had me build a system like she saw in some office. There's actually six shelves there on wheels, and they go back and forth. So that's six deep, is what you just saw. And yeah, I have every single book that my father had up on that shelf still to this day in that collection.
That's awesome. Do you still have to like, do you have to be careful opening them? Are they like, because some of my
I
stuff,
have,
even from when I was younger, I'm afraid to touch it because I'm like, oh man, is something going to break on me?
yeah, the The old paperbacks, actually the old hardcovers, did not use acid-free paper. So the acids in the process of making those books deteriorates. You can see the brown edging.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that I picked up after I grabbed those originals from my father were even older, and those are really really delicate. Like I have the book. I think want to say it's called Occam's Razor, but it's the book where Carl Capek coined the term robot,
Oh.
and that book is ready to fall apart. And it's just a cheap old paperback. It's probably worth about 12 cents on the open market, but it's ancient,
Yeah.
and if I were to open it, all the pages would fall off the spine.
You mentioned D&D, about 15, 16-year-olds running into that. What was the
Mhm.
introduction? Did you just like run across it at a store? Did a friend have it? What was that introduction?
I was the classic nerd in school, good at math and science, not good with people. And I had a bunch of friends who were the same. And the group of friends we were in was a mix of age ranges. There are people who are, 2 or 3 years older and 2 or 3 years younger, as well as people my age in this group of friends. And one of the guys who was in college came back and offered to run a D&D campaign, a game, I should say. The word campaign probably hadn't entered the lexicon at that point.
Right, right.
And he had the old white box set.
Okay, okay.
And so he just did the classic, you're standing in front of the doors to a dungeon after we generated our characters. I mean, this was like before first edition.
Yeah,
And we went in, and I can still to this day remember him describing the scene where a giant rat opens a secret door and charges us down in the hallway. That visual is still burned in my brain because it was unlike anything that I had ever experienced before.
right.
What is this? I don't have a game board here. I don't have any of this stuff, and I'm just supposed to be imagining this, and boom, there it was. I've been reading so much science fiction and fantasy at that point that imagining it was not a problem.
Yeah.
But that's my earliest memory of Dungeons and Dragons, and like I said, it got burned into me.
What is the path from being a kid and a fan and growing up playing D&D to actually getting to TSR? What is that path? What does that path look like?
Well, this is one of my favorite stories, and I have
Okay.
told it many times, and I will tell it again. So if it sounds very polished, that's because I've told it a lot.
Right, right.
Uh,
We can't
so
not do it, right? Maybe our audience hasn't
no, no,
heard
no.
some of
This is
them.
a good story. Everybody needs to hear this story. It goes back to my being the luckiest son of a bitch alive. So I had been playing D&D in high school. When that college friend went home and went back to school, my friends and I were left with nothing to play, and we did our own homegrown thing. An overly complicated 2D20 system that we created ourselves. And when I went away to college, I had this ugly, ugly black plastic suitcase. I mean, it wasn't a big thing, just big enough to hold papers, full of all this stuff. And I didn't have any dice. So we're rolling D6s, multiple D6s, simulating D20s. Not just one, two, because it's a 2D20 system. Um, Fast forward to my junior year, the college had decided to get a new computer. And
Okay.
it turned out it was the same computer system, a Hewlett-Packard 3000, as the computer system that I played around with in high school. And in high school, I'd written a game called Mines of Moria, a really dirt simple simulation of the Mines of Moria from the Tolkien series.
Yeah.
Definitely not worth playing or finding, quite frankly. So I managed to get a job building the college's accounting system over the summer, me and three other guys. And why the college was so cheap is to have college students create an accounting system. I mean, don't think about that too long. That's really not a smart thing to do, but they did. So I spent the summer programming in COBOL for 8 hours a day. And yes, you can send your condolences to me. I'd spent the another 8 hours sleeping, eating, taking care of, being a living human, breathing human being. And I spent the remainder of my time programming games in this hot new computer system that I had administrative level access to.
Yeah.
And I did that all summer long. And when everybody came back in the fall for my senior year, the only games you could play were mine because the system was brand spanking new. So they were a big hit, not necessarily because they were amazing games, although I think a couple of them weren't bad, but because there was nothing else to play.
Yeah.
And one of those games was called Dragons. And a few years ago, I actually got a downloadable copy of it that will run on a simulator for the HP 3000 MPE operating system.
Okay.
So I actually got to relive this part of my early formative years. And so this Dragons game, you rolled up a character using this old 2D20 system, and you went into this dungeon where the empty spaces were periods, the walls were pound signs, the monsters were uh, less than, greater than signs with a number in them. You know, the chests were square brackets with a number in them.
Okay.
But the monsters would move around. They had primitive AI, and it had a ray tracing vision, so you'd only see what you could see. And it was 10 floors of a fairly substantial dungeon filled with monsters and treasures. And people ate it up. They loved it. Fast forward to the middle of the year, and TSR, who happened to be 45 minutes down the road, I didn't mention I should. The college I went to was Beloit College
Oh, okay.
in southern Wisconsin, about 45 minutes from Lake Geneva, where TSR was headquartered at the
Yeah.
time. And being so close, they shared the same salesperson. And they're in the market for a new computer system for their
Okay.
business purposes, and they're going to buy themselves an HP 3000. And the salesperson told them, you know, the college down the road, there's this kid who made a game that's a lot like the stuff you guys sell.
Right.
So here I am, a senior in college, getting a bachelor's degree in mathematics, which is useless in the real world at
Right.
that
Right.
time. Sadly, not as useful as you'd like it to be even today.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what I'm going to do when they call me up and ask me to interview.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell everybody out there, don't wait around for your dream job to call you up out of the blue and ask you to interview. It isn't going to happen. I'm the only guy in the universe that got it. That number has been stricken from the rolls. You can't get it. I got it. But at the same time, and when I talk to colleges, this is something that I try to make them understand, or at high schools even. I was doing the one thing that a hiring manager desperately wants. I've been a hiring manager many, many years, for many, many years, and there's a terror to hiring a new employee. There's a huge risk to it, and you
Yeah.
want to reduce that risk. You want to make sure that person can do the job. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? I'd done the job.
Yeah. It's already done.
There it was. They wanted to hire me to program computer games. I programmed computer games. I programmed their style of computer game.
Yeah.
So I had spent my free time doing the thing I wanted to do, although I didn't know I wanted to do it because I didn't know you could do it for a living.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's actually what led to it. And so what I tell people who want to get into the industry is that you have to do the job. You have to do the work. You can do it through a university or college program. You can do it on your own. But the trick to getting into any industry, but I'll focus on the one I understand, is you have to prove to that manager you know how to do the job. You have to make them feel comfortable. You have to get rid of their anxiety that this could be a problem. Oh, you've already done it. Oh, okay, I got it. Oh, you have amazing grades at this university. Oh, okay, that makes me feel better. You're a hard worker. Whatever it
Right.
happens to be, you do the job to get the job. And that's what I did.
That's amazing. What was the progress? Because you've had a lot of hats in your time at TSR, right? You're doing that, and then
Yeah.
at some point you're writing novels. At some point you're writing modules. What is that? What is that whole kind of career timeline sort of look like on now that you look back on it?
Fractured, like somebody threw a grenade and all the pieces blew up and scattered. Uh, Gaming is not an industry for people who want job security. I have been staggeringly fortunate, lucky son of a bitch again, that I have been largely associated with large, stable companies. TSR was stable for many years
Yeah.
until it wasn't. Bethesda, stable for a few years until it wasn't, then amazingly stable and still is.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, I'm programming computer games. We did 3 of them. It was a department of 2. Um, but it turned out TSR didn't know how to sell them. At that point in time, they were selling printed paper products. They were selling adventure modules,
Yeah.
campaign boxes, novels, things like that. And so they would just put them in the Random House catalog because Random House was their distributor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all they had to do. And then stores would order them. And it was an extremely successful and profitable scheme for them. They put these computer games, which were for the Apple II Plus, into their catalog, and nobody knew what the heck to do with them. Random House didn't know how to promote them.
Yeah.
TSR didn't really promote them. The game stores were like, I don't know about this computer stuff. Is that really what we want to be putting on the and
Hindsight being what
so
it is.
yeah. So they didn't sell particularly well. And about a year and a half into it, they cut the department because they just weren't selling well. Definitely didn't merit supporting the staff, even the minimal staff that they had.
Right.
And I got the opportunity to transit into the uh, computer department, which I did for a little while, and then I transited into the writing group,
How do they
where
pick you for that? How do they get? Do they just like, can you write? And you're like, yeah, I can write.
pretty much, because you have to remember at that time, and I'll quote Jim Ward because this is my favorite quote of his. At that time, there were more people making a living as astronauts than there were as game designers.
Yeah.
There just wasn't anybody doing it. I was right place at the right time. I was friends with the right people, and they knew I had done the computer games and done them well. They liked me. They gave me a shot at writing this stuff, and so I learned how to write on the job.
Okay.
I did not get a degree in writing. I
Yeah.
got a degree in mathematics, and as a writer, I sucked. I had to learn it the hard way. But they gave me a chance. They gave a lot of people a chance. To get a job at TSR in those days, you didn't have to do much. You went to a convention, you proved that you understood the material, you were excited, you were enthusiastic, you were willing to work for slave wages, and you could get yourself a job because there just weren't that many people available and doing it. Certainly wasn't a college program to train you for it.
Right. There should be. There should be. There should have been.
Well, no, not in those days. There just wasn't
Right.
no need for it. I
Right.
mean, there were 20 of us who were making a living at the time. Everybody else was a part-time occupation.
A lot of us, myself included, a lot of our audience members, a lot of our listeners, when they heard that you were coming on, they're like, you've got to ask about your involvement with Ravenloft and what you feel your best contribution to Ravenloft and maybe even Spelljammer was as with your time there.
So the Ravenloft, I'll go through a micro bit of history here.
Yeah.
The Ravenloft adventure on the classic i6 for first edition D&D. Or was it for second? Might have been for second. It's been too long. I don't
It's all
remember.
right.
Was the most popular adventure TSR ever sold. Between Tracy Hickman's amazing game design and the Dave Sutherland maps, which were next generation 3D in a world where only top-down 2D ugly maps were being generated.
Yeah.
It blew people's mind, and it just continued to sell. And the industry in general was beginning to diversify away from just your standard Tolkien-esque fantasy worlds.
Yeah.
So they said, hey, let's do a campaign world set around this extremely popular adventure. Tracy had started to go off and write the novel, so he wasn't there. He probably would have gotten the job because he did work as a game designer for quite a while
Yeah.
at TS. And I made the appeal for it, and I got it. And Andrea Hayday and I, who's listed as the editor, but she really she really was a co-author in a lot of ways. And I fought to get her a accelerated credit, not accelerated, but expanded credit for her work on it. We decided to try and put together something that fit the new vibe of role-playing games at the time,
Yeah.
because the industry was moving away from the classic, here's the dungeon, you go in and beat everything up, take the treasure, get new equipment, wash, rinse, repeat. That was the original. Into a more story formatted thing, which the original I6 Ravenloft Adventure definitely was. And so we wanted something moody. And Vampire the Masquerade was out, and we were really disappointed because we wanted to do all the things they did, but they beat
Right.
us to the punch.
Right.
And so we created something that had a lot of gothic mood to it. Interestingly, the first draft went to Jim Ward's desk, and he read it, and he came back and he said, "Where's the rules? You've got all this color, and there's no rules. I want rules. Where are the rules, guys?" Because rules are what sell. That's what's sold
Yeah.
at that time as well. So we actually had to go back through the manuscript and add rules. And even today, if you look at it, it's rules light. It's still largely mood, but we had to add new rules to differentiate it from traditional Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
and it turned out to be a huge success, and partially because of my efforts, but also due to the efforts of an awful lot of people who came after me writing expansion products for it.
What
And
about the transfer
appreciate it.
from there to like doing the Ravenloft novels that you did and other novels and books?
I haven't done Ravenloft novels. Other people did the Ravenloft novels.
Okay. I could have
Uh,
sworn I saw some. Internet lies to me again.
the internet lies to you again. Yep. I wrote one and only one book during my time at TSR, and that was and please nobody read this. It is very bad. It is related to the Dragon Strike game. They put out four little teeny books, each devoted to one of the characters, and I got to write the Warrior's Tale for it. Um, because I was a horrible writer then.
Right. That's why I was kind of wondering because you were talking about like not doing writing, and
Oh,
then here
boy,
I
no.
had read,
I tried to get a book contract out of them, but they read my submissions. What can I say, Uh, So no, I did not do any of those novels. Novels all came much later for me.
You mentioned the Dragon Strike game, and
Hmm.
sometimes I wonder, like I know of people from the era that were using miniatures in their role playing here and there. Was that kind of the precursor to what we see, even modernly as far as miniatures? Is that what set the tone, or were people using
Oh
miniatures and
no.
doing miniatures for D&D specifically before that? What is that kind of interaction? Where does that fit in the timeline?
Uh the whole Dungeons and Dragons game set evolved out of miniatures combat. It
Okay.
evolved out of historical miniatures where people would set up battle scenes. Civil War was really popular, but they grew out of the medieval fantasy tradition. Then they started getting rule sets for conducting battles in sandbox tables. And that's when Gary and uh, Dave got the idea, hey, let's do something that's different and actually give them personality and character. And that sort of opened the floodgates to what we consider to be modern tabletop role playing. So it came backwards for that. The diehards in the industry have been doing miniatures for a long time. TSR even bought Grenadier Miniatures Company, the second largest at the time. I think Rel Partha was the biggest, at least in the U.S.
Yeah.
Overseas, I think the um, British firms were slightly larger. Games
Games
Workshop,
Workshop, yeah.
but they uh, so they were already doing regular miniatures. Where Dragon Strike came from actually was Hero Quest.
Oh, okay.
Uh, Hero Quest came out and it was a huge hit. And TSR had for a while realized that their path to success was to drive and drill deeper into the age group, get kids playing younger and younger. And so the Dragon Strike, the instructions for Dragon Strike were, we want to have 8-year-olds playing the game. We want a game that will introduce them to that. We love this Hero Quest thing. What can you do? And so we came up with that. And it's a tale of success and failure all wrapped into one. If you want to read a really detailed synopsis of it, you can get Ben Briggs' wonderful book. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I have it up on my shelf, but I can't read it from here through the glare. But it goes through the history of TSR, sort of a rise and fall kind of thing. And Dragon Strike played a significant role in that. But we created a board game that I'm actually pretty proud of the game system. That was pretty good. Some of the other pieces where we tried to incorporate role playing were probably a little forced. And then there's the infamous videotape. The videotape. It was unfortunately, due to restrictions of the time, what was available technically at the time, money, the budget, our personal talent. It was very immature, very, very immature, and it came off as such. And what we thought would be, campy fun for 8-year-olds was actually just bad. But the idea was that you put in the videotape and you learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons or something similar to it, role-playing light, through watching the videotape. And then you had a little booklet with adventures, and you could play these adventures. And if you love that stuff, then you might go get the venerable red box set.
Yeah.
Maybe the dungeon board game or something like that. And that would be the gateway into the larger world of role-playing games.
Yeah. And it just didn't work out.
Well, they bought 100,000 copies of it, and manufactured 100,000 copies of it, and they sold them, and they sold very well. And rather than taking a deep look at things, they ordered another 100,000. The market was already saturated. All the people who wanted to buy it bought it.
Bought it.
And of course, they had to borrow money to manufacture it, and people wanted to get paid. And that was sort of, one of the several straws that broke the camel's back of TSR at the time. Not the biggest straw by any stretch, but it was definitely there.
Well, eventually you ended up parting ways with TSR and moving on.
Correct.
Is that right about the time where you started getting back into video games, doing video game stuff?
Actually, I am a double returnee.
Okay.
So I left TSR the first time
Okay.
because they were having financial issues, and my wife still has not forgiven me for this story. After 4 rounds of layoffs, I turned to my boss and said, pick me next, because I knew I could get a job. I had a computer background.
Yeah.
Looking at all these guys for many of them, the only thing they could do was write Dungeons and Dragons stuff.
Right.
Now, there were a few who weren't. We had, civil engineers and, people who had private careers, but by and large, these guys were not going to find another job, and I knew I could in a heartbeat. So I volunteered. And like I said, my wife has never forgiven me for volunteering, losing my job. So I worked out of the industry for about 4 years, but I did freelance work during that time. And then under the new management with Lorraine Williams, Jim Ward hired me. And so I came back in, and if that was the Dragon Strike era, and Gamma World, and a lot of the big stuff then.
Yeah. Where did you end up going to get back into video games?
So there came a point where the writing was on the wall. It was pretty obvious that TSR was at a crossroads, and they were not taking the right path. It wasn't going to work out.
Okay.
And given that I had the chops to go do something else, I started applying. And I applied to, a very small company, Bethesda Softworks, over in Maryland. And they were working on the sequel to their Arena role-playing game. So they were very eager to talk to me because of my TSR pedigree. and they ended up hiring me. And so I worked for Bethesda Softworks for about 3.5 years until they fired me. I'm very fond of saying I've been hired, I've been fired, I've been laid off, I've done it all. If there
Yeah.
is a way to get into or leave a company, I have done it.
Did,
So,
but they eventually bring you back in, or was that just like it? You're just done after 3 years.
well, 3.5 years I left, and I spent 6 years working out of the industry again
Hmm.
at a company called Convera, which did advanced search engines for three-letter agencies in the federal government and big business. I know a disgustingly large amount of stuff about search engines prior to 1995. Don't ask me anything about something post 1995. Um, and when that company started to have troubles, Bethesda was under new management then. Robert
Okay.
Altman had bought the company from Chris Weaver, and they were doing things a whole different way. My old friend Todd Howard was in charge of the game development side, and he hired me to work on Oblivion, which they had just started working on. So they were, I don't know, 6 months, a year into Oblivion when I came on board, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I joined up with them then, and stayed with them for the next 17 years.
Your list of credits with that company, it seems to touch pretty much every Elder Scrolls games. Obviously, we can't not mention Skyrim, one of the biggest games in history, arguably one of the greatest video games and story games ever to walk the face of the earth. And
Thank
being
you.
the lead
Thank you.
designer behind it, it's there's jokes and memes out there of like, well,
Yes, there are.
it's been another
Yes,
decade. There's
there
going to be
are.
another version of Skyrim that comes out. Not to mention, your ties to things like Fallout, which I mentioned
Hmm.
earlier on, and
Yeah,
Starfield, I believe, was one of them as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I
Like
did a
so
lot of
many
work.
amazing games that you worked on. When you look back on that time, how much do you think your time with TSR and your time with role playing games really helped influence that? Not just that list of games, but the genre in general.
I think it did a lot. I think there was a huge impact, but at the same time, one of the adjustments I had to make is that when you're working in the tabletop industry, you're told produce this manuscript. Let's say the Ravenloft box set, which is that's a big product.
Yeah,
This isn't a small thing, right? So I go off into my office and I write, and it's just me. I may go to other people and bounce ideas off of them,
yeah,
but all the writing is me. And then Andrea Hayday gets a hold of it and says, this writing stuff, maybe you should get better at that and fix a lot of the stuff that I had to. And she had wonderful design decisions, recommendations that I also wanted to implement. But it's a very solitary thing. I work on that for 4 months and it's done. You go to a video game company, and for something like Skyrim, you're talking about hundreds of people. The design team was about 120 I believe, for Skyrim, and that's not counting the freelancers. And you don't do everything yourself.
right.
You just don't. You can't. It's too big. It's too much there. So while I feel that I had a very large impact, I am by no means alone. There's a lot of people who had a huge impact, people on the programming side, people on the art side, other design staff. I mean, it's a long list. It's a team event. And that was definitely the largest thing that I had to wrestle with coming into my second term at Bethesda, is that it's not a solo thing anymore. This isn't like what I used to do. But what TSR did was teach me how to write adventures, how to write adventure stories, and how to do it from the point of view of you don't know and cannot control what your players are going to do. And this is essential for an open world game.
Yeah,
You have to remember, open world games were kind of new back then.
yeah.
This wasn't something that was real common. Skyrim was by no means the first one. The Elder Scrolls series in general was not the first one necessarily. but we were one of the biggest. We kind of defined a lot of the core principles of open world. And what's more open world than a Dungeons and Dragons game?
Right.
Players can decide to go off script. So I was already well primed for, well, how do you write an adventure where they might want to go left or they might want to go right or they might want to kill that guy or they might want to pay this guy. I already understood that in my bones from, decade plus of experience working with that stuff. And I wasn't alone. There were a lot of other people with similar experience who could do that, but definitely tabletop role playing did that for me.
Yeah. It's so amazing to see, to look back and see, for me personally, things that I've done in the past. Now that you're past that part and looking back, is there anything that really stands out to you um, in that time that you go, man, this was an amazing thing that I did in this particular product or in this, in this game or in this system? What is something that you look back on very fondly and very proud of in that era?
Yeah. I have a lot of those actually. When you work on a game for 3 years, 4 years, that's a lot of stuff. And my specialty was system design. And I was a guy who I I got a lot of work done. I did a lot of stuff. So, for example, on Skyrim, Todd Howard's philosophy is that his managers would spend 10% of their time managing and 90% of their time implementing.
Okay.
So I was working the line, if you want to call it that, along with all the other designers. The amount of management I did was small in comparison to the amount of work I did. All the creature stats, all the weapon stats, all of the economy. I did a small quest, but I had my hands in a lot of big, meaty systems. I worked in spreadsheets that would, make your eyes glaze over, to manage enormous amounts of data. That was what I was particularly good at, was managing large amounts of data and systems. The whole combat system, the whole character system, all the perks, that was all me. Now, I say it was all me. Obviously, all my work had to be looked at by people like Todd
Right.
and reviewed by other people. So it's not like I
Play
did it
tested and
and it
all that
got
stuff. Yeah.
published by any stretch of the imagination. I would do something and Todd might come back to me and say, no, let's throw that all out because that's not the way I want to go with this. I want to go in this direction. Give me something that does that. So you say, is there anything that I look at and I'm particularly proud of? It's a stack 50 deep.
Okay.
Um, I can cite you a few particulars that I was proud of to specifically answer your question. In the Shivering Isles DLC, one of the things I did, because it had been on my mind for quite a while, was put together a system where when any NPC is killed, it activates a tombstone in the city's graveyard area. And if you go rob that, you will get all the stuff that was on their body at the
Oh.
time they died. And the tombstone will actually have their name when it didn't before they died.
Oh wow.
So that's something that I was particularly proud of. I thought that's a really nice touch. I really like that.
Yeah. It's always fun to find little things like that when, as a
It
gamer, from a
is.
gamer standpoint, be like, hey, did you guys see this? And still years later, people are finding things in those games. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I hit a bunch of Easter eggs myself in the game. So what can I say?
are there any
What
Easter
can
eggs
I say?
people haven't found that you're aware of?
I no, I think I've revealed many of them in other interviews,
Oh,
but
okay.
in Skyrim, if you go to Morthal, there's a quest there for having to deal with a ghost, a little ghost girl. I was kind of partial to ghost stories. I've
Yeah.
done a few of them in other products. If you go into one of the houses in Morthal, you will find that there is two little urns, one named Danielle's jug and one named Jessica's jug or something like that. Well, Danielle and Jessica are my daughters.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
If you go into Fallout 3 and you go to the Foggy Bottom metro station, my daughter Danielle at the time was enrolled at the uh, in Washington University, which was on the Foggy Bottom train station. That's where you get off to go to that university. And so there's a Danielle's diary tucked under one of the benches there.
Nice.
And then
Nice.
Fallout 4, my daughter Jessica had just gotten married, and I had to get more permission for this because it was a bigger setup. We actually set up her wedding in one of the DLCs. So there's chairs out there. Um, there's the little wedding cards with the, what's going to happen when that you can find under there. Uh, in what was that? Is that 76? Yeah, in 76, I have, or is it Fallout 4? Oh man, just struggling to remember now which one it's in. But you will find George and Anne at a radio station. Those are my parents.
Oh, nice.
You'll find my daughter Michaela referenced in places. So it's, all kinds of little Easter eggs like that. I did mostly family stuff. So
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. Our time's dwindling down. We don't have time to cover all of the things. There's so many things. Let's
I'm
let's
wordy too.
let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
You came up with a book series
Mhm.
that I just the concept of it. I'm a fan of urban fantasies. I love urban fantasies,
Mhm.
and your series, The Mischief Maker, just looks so fantastic and so much fun. Tell our
Well, thank you.
audience a bit about that series and where you came up with that idea, and if you had any other urban fantasy like influences in that, and kind of how you came up with it and put it together.
Well, I've been reading urban fantasy for a while, along with a lot of other stuff.
Right.
But this was at a time when urban fantasy just meant fantasy stories set in the modern times, usually in a city.
Mm-hmm.
These days, urban fantasy is almost synonymous with romantasy. It's almost always a romance story. But the stories I was reading at the time were not romance oriented.
Yeah.
So you technically would have to call it contemporary fantasy. Uh, I have been a big fan of mythology for ages and ages. The Norse mythology in particular is one I'd been heavily drawn to. And one of the things that had been rattling around the back of my head is victors write the histories.
Right.
So in terms of mythology, not uniquely, but not all mythologies have a cycle where the universe ends. The
Right.
Norse mythology does. They have Ragnarok,
Ragnarok. Yeah.
and there were survivors from Ragnarok. Who would have written the histories? Are all these stories we have from Norse times true, or is it just the viewpoint of the victors? So is
Okay.
Loki really the villain? Maybe he's not.
Okay.
So in my stories, Loki is not the villain. I wouldn't call him necessarily a dyed-in-the-wool hero either,
No.
but he is not necessarily the villain. Thor is more villainous, and if you are familiar with the Norse mythology, Thor was not exactly a clean-cut hero
No,
either.
he
He had a
wasn't.
temper.
This
Yeah.
isn't Marvel.
No, 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 no. This is not Marvel. So I wanted to write a story that was set in modern times where Loki's been hiding out, in this case, as a stage magician, and the Norse gods come looking for him and they find him, and he's got to deal with all of that. So it's a trilogy called the Loki Redeemed trilogy. The first book is Mischief Maker, and I rather enjoyed what I did with that. I think Loki's a very fun character to write.
Is there a plan? Because there's 3 books. For those that
Mhm.
are listening, you can go and get all 3 books. Is there plans, or is there any intent, or is there any want to do a 4th book?
I would never say never, but at this point, that story is done for me,
Okay.
and I would like to write different stories. So, I have a new set of books that are coming out right now. First 3 of 6 have been published by Athon, and it's a lit RPG. I don't know if you're familiar with lit RPG. Not a lot
Yeah.
of people are.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
a booming style, right?
it
A booming
is.
genre.
It is. It's to the intersection of gaming and novels where the premise is that the main character has found himself in a situation where the world is run by game rules, as if these were the rules of physics,
Yeah.
where you have levels and it's just part of how the world actually works, and you have gaming rules and whatnot. So I have a 6-part series that coming out. Number 4 will be coming out next month in May, and 5 and 6 will probably follow shortly behind that. Um, so that's called Glory Seeker,
Hmm.
and anybody who wants to play around with that, I, be glad and honored to have somebody read it if that's the kind of book that they enjoy. And then after that, I'll probably write something that's not lit RPG and is not Norse mythology related.
Right. Did you go to Athon or did they come to you?
I went to Athon.
Okay.
I went to
How
Athon.
did you find out about that? Because we've had Rhett C. Bruno on here. He's talked about Athon books and all of the amazing authors. And how did you go? Hey, this is where I want to go with this book idea that I have.
Well, once again, it's playing upon my credentials. So I went to a convention, which was since bought and changed its name, called 20 Books to 50K. It's now called Authors Nation,
Okay.
or Author Nation. And at 20 Books, which is run by Craig Martell, Craig actually published my Loki Redeemed series. So he published Mischief Maker et al. So it's just a continuing habit of my finding people who happen to be the right people in the right place,
Yeah.
the right time for me.
Yeah.
So he knew Rhett, he knew Dakota crowd, he knew a whole bunch of people, and he helped me set up interviews to talk to them. And I talked to Rhett, and it took a couple back and forths before we settled the whole thing, but he eventually agreed to publish my books.
Do you think that your time, because obviously lit RPG, we're talking, you know, games, real world versus, stats and numbers.
Yeah.
And here you are, a person who's worked in, RPG, tabletop RPG, video games, video game RPG. Did all of that history kind of culminate into writing these books and help with
Oh,
it?
absolutely, absolutely. For me, and Red actually mentioned this, and as did Dakota when I was talking to him. Frequently, when they're looking at lit RPG authors, the game system is one of the things they worry about. With me, it was the reverse. It's like, oh, we know he can do the game system. Can he write?
Yeah.
So, the game system was a piece of cake for me. Whether the readers like it or not, you'll have to ask the readers. But that was the easy part. And since I had already written a trilogy, I actually found writing the story wasn't as difficult as it might have otherwise been. So you are now looking at someone who has a degree in mathematics, was never trained to be a writer in any way, shape, or form, learned the hard way to write dialogue at Bethesda and write narrative at TSR, who is now writing novels. And you can judge for yourself whether they're any good, but I hope you like them.
Looking back, what was that shift for you where you go, you from oh I want to write books for TSR, but everybody's like, yeah, they're not good, and you even yourself said multiple times like I wasn't that good, to going, I'm that good, I can write a novel.
Um, you do it. You just do it. So what I did was I was writing other things. I was writing little stories, nothing that ever got published, but little stories. Um, for Bethesda, we had to write these books that would go into the game,
Yeah.
so I'd write some of those. I had definitely done a lot of narrative writing for TSR because that's what you're doing when you're writing an adventure or a rule book. I had done a lot of dialogue writing for the video game side for all those games. And that's what a novel is. It's narrative and dialogue together. So it's like, I can do that. And if you remember, I started this whole journey with 30 books on my father's shelf up above his desk.
Yeah.
So I've been reading voraciously for decades. So I know science fiction, I know fantasy. And I could read a book and say, I could write as well as that, and they got published. I can also read a Hugo Award winner and go, I would never be able to write that. That's way
Yeah.
beyond my skill set. Maybe someday in the future. Or right now, no, this guy definitely beat the pants off of what I can do. So from experience with what I've read and knowing what I'm capable of doing in terms of other stuff, yeah, I felt like I could do that. And so when retirement came and I left Bethesda, that's what I decided to do is become an author. And we'll see how it works out.
When you sit down and you look at the process, whether somebody's doing outlines or whether they're, flying by the seat of their pants, going and looking at designing tabletop RPGs and then writing for video games and now writing novels, what are some key differences in your processes that you have evolved throughout the years?
You mean in terms of novel writing or in terms of game design?
In terms of now that you're writing novels and like
Oh, okay.
what your shift has been from then to now in your process, and maybe even a little bit for even each of them.
Uh, the big shift really is I've got to tell a singular story. There's no branching anymore. There's
Yeah.
no player freedom anymore. That's up to me, which means the main character needs to have a voice. That was the most challenging because there is no main character with a voice in the video games. There's no main character with a voice in the TSR products and Dungeons and Dragons or role playing.
Yeah.
Now suddenly there has to be that. Now, you can write people who aren't the main character who have a voice.
Right.
So, it's not like it's totally alien experience by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm not afraid to put words on a piece of paper. I've been doing it all my frickin' life. And this goes back to you get it done by doing it. You just do. So putting words on a piece of paper, I'm not afraid to do that. There's a lot of authors who have problems where they sit down and they don't know what to write.
Right.
What do I do for those words? Not my problem. I can write. You tell me I got to put down 1,500 words today, I can put down 1,500 words. I might throw them away tomorrow, but I
Right.
can put down 1,500 words.
For those that are listening to the podcast, Glory Seeker, that's the series, right? For your newest book,
Correct.
Glory Seeker, there are 3 books out. Your next one, do you have a date for the 4th one coming out?
I don't have a specific date, but it will be in May.
Okay.
And then the other 2, they're already written. I just have to do the hard work of actually putting them together as a product to put out there. So they will probably come very shortly after. But book 6 is the finale. It does conclude it. The story is completed by then, which I know is a big issue for lit RPG where the stories never seem to end.
Right.
So mine definitely will end, and it is all written. I just have to get it out there to you.
Awesome. And for those that are listening, usually Athon Books is really good about having amazing audiobook narrators as well. So I'm assuming you've got some audiobook work as
Books
well.
1 and 2 have audio. I don't know if they've done audio for book 3 yet. Books 4, 5, and 6 I'm publishing on my own.
Okay.
So
Okay.
not with Athon. So
Okay.
those do not have audiobooks because they do have amazing audiobooks, and those are really expensive to
They are.
produce.
They are. I know
So
a lot of people with like vision impairments or time restraints that just love audiobooks, and I've always been a big supporter
yeah.
of audiobooks as well. So I had to
Well,
ask and mention it and bring it up for you.
it's a really good point, and books 1 and 2 guaranteed have audiobooks, and book 3 probably will, but I gotta wait for them to actually produce the audio. That comes after sometimes due to schedules and things
Yeah.
like that.
Awesome. Sounds good. You don't have any real upcoming appearances. You've been known to do conventions from time to time in the past, so hopefully we'll get to see you on other conventions or other podcasts coming up down the road. Of course, past podcasts, you guys can find them
Invite
all over the
me,
place.
convention organizers, invite me.
Invite Bruce. Come on, guys. Get with it. Get with it. There's so many around the world that need a guy that's done everything. Social medias, people can find you on Facebook. They can just search Bruce Nesmith, author. I know anybody who follows us on Facebook, I've tagged you in a few recent posts, so they can find you
Thank
through
you.
me as well. So definitely go and check him out there. Do you have any other things you want to talk about? Anything else you want to promote or direct people to anywhere?
Uh, just the books that we've already talked about. I keep my life simple these days. I'm not doing 5,000 things at once. It keeps me sane and helps me stay happy and chipper and all of that. But if there's a theme that's run through this conversation with you, it's got to be you do something to get to do something. So
That's
I would probably leave you with those words.
that's a great piece of advice for everybody. Thank you so much, Bruce, for being here. Of course, anybody that's watching the live stream, stick around, throw your questions up in the audience, and we will answer those questions about whatever you have for Bruce. We will get to those in the Q&A here in just a moment. But of course, coming up, guys, we're going to be joined by writer and podcaster Trevor Bettist. He's going to be joining us. We're going to probably talk about maybe some Idle Champions of Forgotten Realms, maybe some of his web comics, maybe some of his podcasting stuff, and so much more. That's going to be live May 5th. The podcast will be available May 16th, or May 6th. I apologize. Will be available on May 6th. Also coming up, Kelly Fitzpatrick, Mike Selinker, Nathan Crowder, Jeff Grubb, so many more. It's going to be amazing. So please make sure follow, like, subscribe, push all of those buttons. It helps us, and in turn helps our guest. So, for Bruce Nesmith, I am Nick, and I want to thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.